We begin in a small village in England where leaders of some of the world's largest democracies have kicked off their meetings at the Group of Seven summit. This is their first face-to-face discussion since the start of the pandemic. On their agenda, China's growing prominence in the world and climate change. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson welcomed his counterparts.
I actually think this is a meeting that genuinely needs to happen because we need to make sure that we learn the lessons from the pandemic. We need to make sure that we don't repeat some of the errors that we doubtless made in the course of the last 18 months or so. And we need to make sure that we now allow our economies to recover.
During their three-day meeting, the leaders are expected to agree to provide 1 billion COVID vaccine doses to the world. Johnson earlier pledged to help vaccinate the entire world by the end of next year. Security challenges posed by China are also expected to be a topic of discussion, as well as climate change. And, of course, with the Tokyo Games starting next month, Japan's Prime Minister says he'll explain how the government will take thorough infection control measures to win support from the G7. Just one day before the G7 summit, China passed a law aimed at countering foreign sanctions. The Standing Committee of the National People's Congress adopted the law. It states that China has the right to retaliate against discriminatory measures directed at the country's citizens. Foreign individuals and entities placed on the government's anti-foreign sanctions list may be denied entry or expelled from the country. Their assets in China may be seized, and they could be banned from doing business there.
The Chinese government has launched multiple corresponding countermeasures against entities and individuals of relevant countries in order to resolutely safeguard national sovereignty, dignity, and core interests, and oppose Western hegemonism and power politics.
China has already taken retaliatory measures against some of the countries that have imposed sanctions over human rights issues in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region and Hong Kong. The upper house of Japan's Diet has adopted a resolution calling for Taiwan's participation in next year's annual assembly of the World Health Organization as an observer. In May, the WHO member countries failed to invite Taiwan due to opposition from China and others.
Countries around the world share a common view that Taiwan's absence at internationally important meetings is a global loss in terms of international epidemic prevention.
Members of the House on Friday unanimously passed the resolution, which was submitted by a nonpartisan group of lawmakers. The resolution points out that it's essential for the world to share the knowledge and experience of a region that's achieved results in public health. It says Taiwan has made efforts to contain the coronavirus pandemic by stepping up quarantine measures. The resolution also urges the Japanese government to work with other countries to ensure that Taiwan will be guaranteed the opportunity to attend WHO meetings. The upper house lawmakers also condemned Myanmar's military coup and called for a quick restoration of the country's democratic political system. They demanded that the military leaders immediately halt their cruel treatment of civilians and release Aung San Suu Kyi and others from detention. South Korea's main opposition party has chosen as its new leader a 36-year-old Harvard-educated computer expert with no experience as a lawmaker. The People Power Party held a convention on Friday to elect its head. Lee Jun-suk defeated 4 senior and established rivals in the party's leadership contest.
Our biggest task is to win the presidential election. I will work to create a party where various presidential candidates and their supporters can coexist.
After studying at Harvard University, Lee was recruited in 2011 by Park Geun-hye, who later became the country's president, and joined a conservative party that later became the PPP. Over the years, he's steadily boosted his public profile with high-profile calls for political reform. He cannot run in the presidential election as he's under the minimum age of 40. The PPP has yet to find a strong candidate for next year's race. With just 6 weeks to go to the Tokyo Games, the International Olympic Committee president has reiterated that the events will go ahead as scheduled. But experts are concerned the Games could trigger another spike in coronavirus cases. Japan's top COVID response advisor expressed his concerns over the Games' possible impact on worsening the pandemic.
If the government and the organizers hold the Games, it will be important to fully recognize that there is a risk and figure out how to manage the Games to gain public cooperation. It is important to make sure that a terrible situation will not happen.
Omi had said the experts plan to lay out their proposal to minimize risks later this month. Japan's daily cases have been on a steady decline after a state of emergency was issued in April. But experts are warning that easing restrictions could cause another spike. They're also concerned about potentially more transmissible variants that are spreading in the country. A high-ranking sumo wrestler who violated pandemic protocols is being forced to sit out 6 tournaments as punishment. The Japan Sumo Association's ban essentially puts Ozeki Asanoyama on the shelf for a year. Asanoyama visited nightclubs 10 times between January and May when sumo wrestlers were ordered not to go out. He initially denied he'd broken any rules. In addition to missing six tournaments, the wrestler will have his pay halved for 6 months. Asanoyama submitted a retirement declaration, but the association has so far declined to accept it. By the time the 27-year-old returns to the ring, he'll have dropped far out of the top tier. It's a steep fall for a popular wrestler once tipped to reach the sport's pinnacle. Just 2 years ago, he received the United States President's Cup from former U.S. President Donald Trump when he won his first championship at the summer tournament. All 14 crew members of a Japanese fishing boat seized by Russian authorities have returned to their home port in northern Japan. The vessel arrived at the port on Friday morning. The fishermen are in good health. Russian officials had detained the trawler for 2 weeks, accusing the boat of operating inside Russia's exclusive economic zone. But the Japanese Foreign Ministry claimed it had been within Japan's exclusive economic zone. The crew reportedly paid fines of about $82,000 to be allowed to return to Japan. A local fishing cooperative has criticized the Russian side, calling the seizure of the vessel unjust. The pandemic has impacted sporting events beyond the Tokyo Olympics. For athletes who've undergone organ transplants, the biennial World Transplant Games offers a chance to gather and compete. But this year, the Games had to go virtual. NHK World's Kojima Mei met one of the athletes who has a message for the world.
Kimura Yudai underwent a kidney transplant 4 years ago, but he doesn't let that slow him down. This year's virtual race, 5K Anyway, allowed anyone from transplant survivors to donors to supporters to complete 5,000 reps or meters of their chosen activity. Participants, including Kimura, shared their progress online.
I would like everyone to know that a transplant recipient is doing well in Japan.
Kimura was born with weak kidney functions. His condition worsened to the point of needing a transplant or artificial dialysis. Even though it's major surgery for a donor, his father wanted to give him his kidney. In Japan, it's more common to receive transplantations from living donors, mainly family members.
I asked myself whether I could receive his kidney. Do I deserve to be alive after hurting somebody else?
While hospitalized, he learned about the World Transplant Games and resolved to compete in 2019 in the UK as a way to show his recovery. Aside from 2 bronze medals, he walked away with a new motivation after seeing so many people with transplants from around the world be involved in the sport.
Attending the games, I felt people with transplants can enjoy and compete in sports. And so I would like to raise people's awareness of transplantation and what you can achieve after recovery.
Kimura's achievements haven't stopped. At the virtual event, he chose 3 sports to compete in. Over 6 days, he swam 5 kilometers and won a gold medal.
We thought we could do something, even if the pandemic poses limits, and we did. This strengthens the circle of people living with transplants. And I felt and reconfirmed that joy of working together and connecting to the world, and I really enjoyed it.
Kimura says he wants to give hope to people affected by transplantation and show how it gives athletes like himself the chance to live a full, healthy life once more. Kojima Mei, NHK World, Nagoya.
It's time now for world weather. Heavy snow and cold weather have hit parts of southeastern Australia this week. Our meteorologist Sakamori has the details.
Hello there. On Thursday, New South Wales saw significant snowfall. A ski resort saw nearly 70 centimeters of snow. Sydney had the coldest day since 1984. But on Friday, we saw a majestic sight in the city. This is the video coming out of Sydney. Thick fog closed over Sydney Friday morning, making the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House seemingly disappear. Several ferry services were cancelled or delayed, and the low visibility caused issues for motorists and runners. The fog came after cold air from the Antarctic pushing through the region, bringing the temperatures in the city to just 10.3 degrees Celsius, breaking a 37-year-old record. But temperatures will be on the rise in Sydney. As you can see this, sunny weather is expected from Saturday into Tuesday. Rain could fall on Wednesday, but temperatures will be in the double digits every day. Meanwhile, we still have a low down here. It is expected to bring heavy rainfall, strong winds, and also some mountain snow to parts of Victoria as well as Tasmania. So we have flood warnings in place in these states. Let's go to Asia. We saw heavy rainfall hitting parts of Jeju Island. Jeju Island saw over 420 millimeters of rainfall from Thursday to Friday. And we have a stationary low over southern China, so heavy rain hit parts of the country. Meanwhile, we have a tropical depression near Hainan. It is expected to dump heavy rainfall over Hainan and Guangxi province. Eventually, it could intensify to a tropical storm and could make landfall in northern Vietnam.
The United Nations warns of a humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia's Tigray area, saying an extreme lack of food and violence threatens 350,000 people. Hong Kong officials announce an amendment giving them added power to ban movies considered to be a national security threat. In Myanmar, the military government accuses former leader Aung San Suu Kyi of accepting illegal payments, including $600,000 and gold. Her lawyer denies the charges. And U.S. media report the Justice Department ordered Apple in 2018 to provide information on communications of 2 U.S. House representatives.
Presidents and prime ministers from the world's leading democracies are in Cornwall for the G7 summit. COVID recovery and trade are key items on the agenda. Well, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson formally opened the summit with the focus clearly on the coronavirus pandemic. The G7 leaders are expected to make a pledge that 1 billion vaccine doses will be given to poorer countries. A teenage girl who filmed the murder of George Floyd has been awarded a special citation in this year's Pulitzer Prizes. She was recognized for her courage and for highlighting the role ordinary people have to play in journalists' quest for truth. For football fans, the long wait for Euro 2020 is over after being postponed last year because of the pandemic. Italy have kicked off the tournament against Turkey in Rome.